And one of our very favorite guests. You see her everywhere. You hear her everywhere. You can read her work as well on CBSSports.com. Aditi Kinkhabwala stopping by for a Friday conversation. What's up, Aditi? How are you?
That was a heck of a plug. Thanks so much, my friend.
Absolutely. You are welcome. And again, plug what you are doing this weekend because you are going to be in one of the coldest places in the world, right?
So I thought Kansas City last week was brutal. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, I was crying even before I got through the parking lot, like literally crying, tears coming down my face. I was so cold. And now I am rewarded with Buffalo, where apparently they're going to have had 70 inches of snow by the time Saturday gets here in this 1 week. And I think it's going to be about 12 degrees. So, but I won't be on television. I will be on radio on Westwood 1. So if I am wearing a balaclava and totally bundled up and look like Ramon Foster did back in the Pittsburgh Steelers days. Ramon, you never wore sleeves, though, did you? Were you one of those weird guys that insisted on short sleeves?
See, you call us weird that didn't wear sleeves. We were the majority for the most part.
Here we
you
go.
couldn't wear the sleeves. Come on now.
You know what? So Tyreek Hill, I see Tyreek Hill run out to warm up. And I'm like, Tyreek, where are your sleeves? And he goes, I don't need none. And he says, I'm tough. And you know what I said, Kayla? I said, I've had 2 babies. I know how tough I am.
Amen.
I don't need
Amen.
to be sleeveless to prove that I'm tough.
That is awesome.
I don't know. But anyway, I'm of course excited, not only because my son is a member of Bill's Mafia, but because I love those fans. I love fans that are loyal and have been waiting forever. And, you know, Deion Dawkins made the point this week that Patrick Mahomes has played in Buffalo, but never in front of Bill's Mafia. And that's a totally different experience.
It's a good point. It is a great point, and it is going to be a fun one. So you hear Aditi now on our airwaves, then you will hear her this weekend as well on our airwaves, courtesy of Westwood 1 with Kevin Harlan and Mike Mayock. Aditi, I have to give one little plug locally real quick as well, that I went to school with Dawson Knox for 6 years as well, and we graduated together. So tell him I said hello if you see him, because he will also be one of the, I say this friendly Dawson, I know his family's probably listening, one of the idiots probably not wearing sleeves as well.
Well, those tight ends, they've certainly been having some fun up there. So you and Dawson were buddies? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we went through 7th grade through senior year of high school together. And, good friend. He's
wow.
I had friends up there, principals and teachers go up there from time to time. Great family, one of the greatest guys that I know.
All right, well, all fair. You'll have to give me a little nugget that I can drop in the broadcast. That if his parents are, this is terrible though, guys, because the game's on CBS, which is my home. So it's not like I can say, listen to the radio instead of watching CBS. Maybe they should keep the CBS on camera, but listen to Kevin Mayock and me on the radio.
Absolutely.
Does that work?
Yes.
Yep, that works.
All right, so are you stressed about this head coaching thing, or are you super excited about the new blood?
We were going to ask you the same thing, Aditi, because we spoke about Mike Vrabel's job security as hey, let's throw this in at the end. Maybe this is something that could happen, right? At the end of our last conversation, but we didn't think this was going to materialize until obviously things get louder and louder. And then the Sunday, the last game of the season, it's, okay, crap, this might be a legitimate thing that's happening. From everything we have learned about this fiasco here in Tennessee, Aditi, what stands out to you the most, and what was your initial reaction to that news?
Shock. I was wrong. Was I not wrong? Because when we talked about it, I was like, no, he's one of the best coaches in the league, which he still is, and his players play for him. And unfortunately, if your boss, coaching is in a lot of ways like the media industry, and it can be subjective. And if someone doesn't love you anymore, they don't love you anymore. So I am sure I spoke to, in fact, a former coach who had talked to Vrabel that very night. I am sure that Mike Vrabel is going to land in a place that he wants to land. And if he doesn't, he will not have a problem waiting for the right fit because he knows exactly who he is. I am sorry, there's 6 inches of snow here in Pittsburgh, and my daughter apparently does not want to bundle up, which she's learning from her son.
Just like me growing up, Aditi. No coat.
I just am. I'm curious about the direction that the Titans will go in now. And you look at this list of candidates, and Will, you mentioned that I wrote on CBSSports.com, and the piece that I actually wrote was, why don't special coordinators get more of a look? Why don't special teams coordinators get more of a look? And you look at John Harbaugh, and the argument I made was that nobody else touches every other player on the team. Nobody else, every single time he's coaching on the field, is coaching 22 guys at a time. Like, think about it. The tight ends coach has 3 guys over on the side. The running backs coach only has a few. Nobody else needs to know players on both sides of the ball. Nobody else has to adjust and account for roster changes and figure out people's special talents, command a room, all of those things. And so I see these young coaches, like, let's talk about a guy named Bobby Slowick, who's certainly put in his time. I mean, I met him a dozen years ago when he was in Washington on that great Mike Shanahan staff. He's done tremendous things with C.J. Stroud and the Texans offense this year. But there's a piece of you that's also like, okay, so he's been an offensive coordinator for 1 year. That makes you ready to lead a team? Maybe. And Thomas Brown is a guy that, it's funny, Ramon, he walked into our room and I was like, oh my gosh, he's Mike Tomlin all over again. He has no indoor voice. He's very strong in his principles, just like Bobby is. And please, I'm not knocking Bobby Slowick in any way, but it's just we're always looking at the same things. And I'll refer to a line that John Harbaugh gave me. He said, every head coach in some way is a unicorn. You have to be every successful head coach is a unicorn in some way. So if you're looking for the next unicorn, why do these owners keep looking where the horses are? And it feels like in this hiring cycle, so many of the candidates are kind of similar. Someone who ran a really good offense and was a really good play caller. I like that the Titans are mixing it up a little bit. I love the idea of David Shaw. Everything I've ever heard about David Shaw is that he's a great leader of men, and in many ways similar to a Jim Caldwell. I like that Aaron Glenn is getting some looks because I love what he's done and the way that players play for him and the experience that he has. I think in Tennessee, the fact that Coach Vrabel was a player for so long and knew exactly what those guys went through and knew how the ecosystem of a locker room matters so much. All of those, I think, are valuable things. But again, not to cut out anybody who wasn't a player in the league. I'm just getting myself in trouble. Can someone cut me off so I can stop talking for a little while?
It sounds like your daughter was trying to.
The problem is that when you talk, you sometimes are saying, well, am I backing myself into the corner? And how does this sound right here?
I get it.
But, I mean, you guys do it for a living every day. Do you get over it at some point? Are you kind of like, I'm not really worried?
No, and
you have to, Aditi, because that's the thing. When you do this for a profession, as a job, a career, stuff is ever changing the same way that it changed very fast. On us having a conversation with Vrabel is safe. I can see an idea of him getting fired. Most people, I think we had Vrabel hot seat at a 2 or 3, which is not hot at all. Heck, the stove just turned on, right? I have to ask you, Aditi, from a national perspective, how did you view Vrabel as a coach? You know, that you said, and almost everybody else has said, when it comes down to these head coaching candidates, leaders of men, and then you look at Vrabel, you say the same thing. You said the same thing about the other candidates, right, that you've somewhat talked about. What does it mean, and why couldn't, from your perspective, or how could you understand Vrabel being let go here in Nashville as a part of that too?
So that's such a compound question. I'll say this. I think that, it's funny. I talked to Coach Cowher, Bill Cowher, who, of course, won a Super Bowl with the Steelers and is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I talked to him last week, and he said to me, 80% of – we were still talking about this special teams thing because Coach Cowher was a special teams coordinator, but he said that 80% of coaching, of being a great head coach, is motivational, and 20% is tactical. That it's really not about the scheme, that the best head coaches are not slaves to schemes. They're thinking about players and putting their players in position to succeed and everything along those lines. And when I sit here and I think about Mike Vrabel, I'll give you an example from the last game that I was at. The Titans obviously had won that phenomenal game against the Dolphins, that really signature win for Will Levis. Monday night, they come back, they're home, and they're playing the Texans, who are starting Case Keenum. And as much as people say, oh, there's no such thing as a hangover, there's no such thing as a letdown, it is a real thing, right? Like, it is a real thing. And I think that Mike Vrabel sort of picked up on where his team's energy was. And if you recall, very early in that game, there was a fourth down deep in their own territory. And forgive me because there's been a lot of games since then. I want to say it was like a 4th and 2 at like their own 26, something like that. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Just familiar? Okay. Thank you, Kayla. So anyway, Vrabel on the sideline goes for it. And in a vacuum, you would think that's just such an insane move. But it's not. He wanted to juice his team. He wanted to juice his players. He wanted to get them fired up. And he felt like they needed a little something. And the Titans converted. And that, to me, is a moment where your head coach is reading the room. He's reading his players. He knows what his players need beyond just a great play call, if that makes any sense. Are you with me? Or
yes.
Absolutely.
Going into the ether?
No, you are making complete sense.
Thank you, Kayla. So I think that coaching is not only about, how often are you blitzing? What are you doing with your safeties? Are you running the ball this percentage of the time on first down? It's not just that. It's knowing what gets your guys going. It's knowing how to get your guys going. It's knowing when they need to be gotten. It's knowing who needs to be disciplined in a certain way and who needs a little extra slack today. It's all of those things. And when I look at Mike Vrabel, and I especially think about last year when he really had no wide receivers, those teams played hard, at least from my perspective, right? Like, you guys are there every single week. You know better than me. But from the outside looking in, it certainly feels like Mike Vrabel teams play hard. They may be not as talented. They may not have all the pieces. And I'll go back to, not having any wide receiver ones a year ago. But they play hard. And that, to me, is a testament to the coach.
Aditi Kinkhabwala, CBS Sports and Westwood 1, our guest.
Aditi, and I agree with you on that. And I think what fans are really frustrated with here was just, I guess, the last 2 years losing seasons. They didn't like a lot of him in terms of like his coordinator, I guess, hires or promotions. And so I think it goes deeper for the fans. But you do see in a head coach, and that's what they've said here with Amy Adams-Strunk, like they still want a leader of men. And that is why I feel like Vrabel will get a job somewhere else. Where do you feel like a guy like him is going to end up if there is the right place out there right now?
I don't know, and I think that I say that because it feels as if there's still some dominoes to fall. Does Jim Harbaugh go to the Chargers? Does Bill Belichick go to the Falcons? And it almost feels as if those two change the state of play in a lot of ways. And if not, the Chargers are in cap hell.
Yep.
They've got 5 players locked up with all this money, and they've got all these questions about, is Bosa going to be healthy, and what do you do with these wide receivers? Keenan Allen certainly coming off of a phenomenal year, but definitely aging. Mike Williams definitely aging. Khalil Mack, who is a force, but of course a lot of money. But you've got a quarterback. You've got a quarterback that in some ways has underachieved a little bit, but maybe he hasn't been set up the best ways. He certainly has all the talent and the demeanor to do it. So you would think that that's certainly attractive. And it's LA. It's California. Did I just call them San Diego? The Chargers. I just
Yep.
the Chargers.
We do it all the time.
Okay. Thank you. Vegas. I've always gotten over the Raiders thing, but I did refer to them as Oakland the other day too. Atlanta, I love that defense. I love that Atlanta defense. And there's a lot of tremendous leaders of men on that defense. And I think if there's anything we've learned, you need internal player leadership too. But they've got a huge question at quarterback, and that certainly killed Belichick the last few years.
Yep.
And, so I don't know that I can tell you what is an ideal fit, because there's also, how much say is Vrabel going to insist upon? And does he have the ability to do that? I'm very much of the mind, and it's easy for me to say this because I've never been in this position, but I like a separation of powers. I like a head coach who is a CEO head coach who hires trusted people to call the plays and such on defense and offense so that he is available to every unit at all times. I like having a general manager who is separate of the head coach so that there are personnel checks and balances and that there's genuine debate. You know, it's funny. John Harbaugh and Eric DaCosta, to me, are such a great pairing because they know how to argue. And I think there's a real skill in knowing how to argue with someone. And maybe you feel so strongly about A, and the other person feels so strongly about B, and you can fight it out, and think the person who wants B is totally wrong, but still leave with respect for each other. And I think that that's so important, right? And so, like, when one person has all the power, I don't love that. You know, like in the city of Pittsburgh, we're talking about this a lot right now. Does Mike Tomlin get so much credit for doing whatever he's done with this roster? Well, Mike Tomlin has as much say over this roster as anybody else. So, like, chicken or egg, right? Like, this is a bet of his own making in some ways. So I don't know. I mean, not that Mike Vrabel is listening to me, but I would tell him sometimes it's nice to have a GM that you can trust and believe in. And hey, last year in Rand picked 7 guys that all contributed in some way. So a smart GM is not necessarily something holding you back. It might be someone who makes you better.
Yep.
It's great insight from Aditi Kinkhabwala, who is everywhere. Read her on CBSSports.com. We'll link that article she mentioned as well about the special teams coaches, and the insight in that, I think, is noteworthy and interesting there. And this is the first time you'll be able to hear her on the Zone this upcoming weekend, as Westwood One coverage of Chiefs and Bills will be right here. Aditi, stay warm, enjoy it, and thank you as always. Great stuff.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I can't wait to be back when it's warm. Nashville.
And when they have a coach, right?
Think warm thoughts.
You know what's so funny, actually? I was at the NFL Network when Mike Vrabel was hired, and I was the person sent for Mike Vrabel's opening press conference.
And I remember you sitting in that room where they used to have press conferences, Aditi. I remember that.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I hope I was friendly.
You were great.
I remember that my cameraman got in a fight with my producer. I remember that. And then I remember interviewing Vrabel in the practice bubble, and my producer had us like sit on a table because if we stood, it was like way too jarring. Yeah. And Vrabel looked a little menacing because he was so big.
See, these are
in a very good mood that day.
These are the kinds of off-season stories that we will be able to discuss with Aditi when the Titans have a coach and there is not playoff football and negative 70 degrees going on. So stay tuned for that.
Discuss how to make a good live shot and how to set an interview so that the new head coach doesn't look menacing next to the 5'3".
I love it.